Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, founder and principal consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And in this video, I would like to develop our drop down boxes because our last video, we left off with creating this drop down box. So this is just the typical defaulted. And what I also did was I took this and added another line here. And then I also formatted this differently just to where it wouldn't overflow. If you remember right, it overflowed a little bit when we zoomed in and out. And now it doesn't do that. It stays within its column. The chart itself will condense, of course, but it doesn't overflow into this. And I'd like to show you how I did that just really quick. Again, this series isn't designed to sit here and create a PCM from start to scratch. The intent is truly to give the foundational knowledge of the codes, what the codes do, the functions, how to create the functions, how to create those operations to where you can take those little code snippets and then develop something like this to fit your needs. Because simply copying and pasting really, in my eyes, doesn't really teach, but giving enough to make you hungry for more and figuring out exactly what is happening so you can change what is happening. I feel that that is the best way to learn, particularly Google Apps Script. So let's go over here to the code and I'll show you what I did with that. What I did was wrapped everything into a container, our chart and our legend here. And I called these divs the chart container and the scatter chart. Now you'll notice that the div placement is crucial here because I wanted this to be within um, essentially that column. I wanted that one column to contain everything that dealt with our chart. And what I was able to do when I gave these IDs, the container and then the scatter chart, was I was able to come over here to our CSS, our operations CSS. That's what we're pulling it from. Yep, here we go. And grab these chart container IDs and then do something with them. Essentially, make it hidden to where it won't overflow. Ensure that it has a fixed width and height to where it doesn't grow or shrink, and then ensure that it filled the entire container or that column. So you'll have this. You can always pause this video here and then copy this if you'd like to, or you could play around. I would suggest you play around with it yourself to determine what actually does what. And then what we also did was we created a border. And maybe what we'll do with this border is give it a different color here. Maybe we can do 2. So let's change that and then see what that actually does. Okay. Yep. So it just created this border here. I'll put it back to one pix. I think I don't like that thick of a border. It kind of competes with the rest of it. Yep, there we go. And what I was able to do was essentially set this to where it takes up the entire width of this column, but again, doesn't overflow. So what we're going to do in this column is, of course, we're going to have these 2 drop-down boxes here. And I'll also put some other fields in here. So after we filter it, we can then just run some basic analysis on here, like the average pay, average experience, and maybe perhaps the number of male versus female versus non-binary employees. But first, we've got to populate these drop downs. Now, if you remember, we actually already did this. And we did this through these two drop-down boxes here. And we don't necessarily need them to be, dependent per se, but we do need the divisions and the job titles. So actually, let's go back here to our code, to our total rewards page, and let's find those drop down boxes here. And let's change this option to division. And then we can change this one to job title. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to get this done in one 30-minute video clip, but we can get a good number of this done. At least we can start working on building this one out. So the first thing that we want to do is think about where we did this. And we did this in our operations page. And our operations page, we populated all of these drop-down fields. In fact, we even did one for the division. And what we can do is use this section right here, this select, as a template. We don't have to retype everything. We don't need this rec dd because this is on the rec, but the basic structure we can use. So we don't want rec division. We would want that to be comp division. And we want to remove everything except the selected. So let's come back over here and let's get rid of that one. And our ID, we don't want this to be this input group select one thing. We want this to be comp division. And if you think about what we're doing, we are doing a redundancy. And the reason we're doing this as a redundancy is how we're structuring this PCM is by a set of modules. You have definitely the entire PCM. And if I was doing this with the full package, so to speak, I would create just one file of code and do things one time and then send it where it needs to go. But since we're doing a module type to where you have essentially a standalone file for records management, you'll have a standalone file for comp. That's why we're going to have the redundancies here, just in case you were wondering. And so that'll be the comp division. That's taken care of. So now what we need to do, if you remember what happened here, is in our operations.js, we did this populate first drop down when the page content loads. So we're going to need to do that. But the problem is since this is going to be a standalone module, like a compensation module piece for this PCM, we're going to need our own JS file for it. So let's go ahead and create another HTML file, and we'll call this total rewards JS. And now this JS isn't going to take this HTML stuff. It's going to take the script tags. So let's start copying over stuff that we're going to need from this. We're obviously going to need this. And our internal script page is, we are going to need this. And we're not going to need our reports or our data. But what we are going to need to do is this piece right here. We want to populate that initial category. So let's actually comment this out just for now to make sure that we still have our functionality within our page. So let's go back here to our page because we have to change something. You'll notice that this includes, or this gather function that we created here is calling our operations.js. Again, if this wasn't a standalone, we could call the operations.js and then just add on oh, by the way, also populate these fields. But since this is a standalone, we have to call this total rewards JS instead of operations. So let's do total rewards JS. And now if we were to save this, and we can just keep this operations JS here, fine. I'll fix that later, create its own. But if we were to save this and then come back here to this page, everything else should still be connected and looks the same. So this should not have changed in any way other than where it's going to be getting its JS from. So let's go ahead and get rid of this hello too. Over here, we don't need that anymore. Wherever I put it. Hello, here it is. Get rid of that. We don't need that anymore. So let's go back here to our total rewards JS and let's open this up here. So let's think about what this is doing. This is adding an event listener to the document that once the DOM content is loaded, we want to fire off a function. And this function is going to be a Google app script on our server side. And we don't want to get the first dropdown, although, again, if this wasn't standalone, we can use that function, but we want to keep it separate. And let's just call this on our server side get comp div dd. And then this is going to be with a success handler, and we want to run that run a function on this side, our client side, with whatever this returns. And we'll call this pop comp div dd. So now let's just simply create that function here real quick. This pop comp div dd. And we'll just give an alert. I am the pop comp div dd function, and I've been called. Okay, so once that is actually sent over to our server side, and that server side does what it needs to do and then sends it back, it's going to run this function, and this function is simply going to just tell us what it is and that it's running. So now what we can do is go over and borrow with pride the drop-down Google app script that we use to populate those main categories. So we can come over here, and what we're wanting is the list. So we are wanting not the drop-down categories, but we're wanting this division list. So what we can do is come down to that function, which is this right here, and simply just copy all this. But what we need is our own, we can do this in our analytics. Google App Script, that'll be fine. I said I'll go through and I'll change all this here to its own. So this function is essentially going to run this, and it is called this get comp div dd. So there we go. So now it's referencing this web app data, and this web app data exists in a file, but since this is a project folder, it would be able to grab that and use it. But since we're making this a standalone, let's just copy it and make it redundant again. That should be fine. I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. We will find out. This being a constant variable may throw it off because you can't really change constants, but it's declaring the same thing. So let's see if it works. If not, we'll just cut it and do our own thing. So now let's go ahead and log out this division dropdown and see what it is that we actually have here. So let's log this this division dropdown. And what this is doing is it's finding the web app data in the getting the range of F all the way down. So this is allowing us to expand on this if we need to, or delete, say operations gets absorbed by facilities or something. So it allows us to dynamically change this without having to go into our code and hard code it in. So let's save this and actually run it here. There we go. Let's run it and see what we get. Okay, so yeah, it's already been declared by main.js. So that's not going to work. It's trying to declare it twice, so we don't need that. So it'll just pull it all the way over there. Okay, good. So now you see that we now have our two-dimensional array of all of our divisions. So how we did this with our main.js file here is we took all of these pieces here and then we sent it over to our client side, our HTML side. What I would like to do, however, is I would like to actually run this get record DD data to see how it is that we are sending this. So we're sending it over as a two-dimensional array, and our data exists as a two-dimensional array, so we should just simply be able to return our variable, this division dropdown. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's return division dropdown. And now what we're going to do is go over to our client side, our HTML side, and do something with this data. So let's just call the data that we're receiving, we got to give it a name, and let's just simply call it divisions for now. And what we should be able to do now is run this function, and we should get this alert. So let's come back over here to our page, and let's refresh our page and see what actually happens here. There we go. I am the popcon div, and I've been called. So now we haven't populated this yet, but what we did do is we sent our data over here. So what we can pass through here is divisions, save it, and then go back and refresh it. And the data within our divisions should populate in our alert. And it sure does. So now what we can do is essentially do a for each and create the rows and append the child like we did with these. Okay, so that's interesting. We'll have to figure out what's going on with this. So the reason why this isn't being populated, you'll notice, is because we are working off a new JS file. So we'll have to grab that and yank it over as well. So let's go over here to our operations.js. And the one thing that we need to pull over is this again to populate our subcategories. Because we're not actually attached to this operations.js anymore. We're attached to this total rewards, and it wasn't populating the category, the subcategory. And you'll see as now that we brought that stuff over, we can come back over here and refresh this, and then it will run it as, no, not running it as normal because we got to call it. Sorry about that. Hang out with me. We got to grab this and also add this. This is the challenge when you are making things standalone. There is a little bit of redundancy, but with it being standalone, you can actually do different things with it. You know, you can carve out certain functionalities, and even authorize certain functionalities for different individuals, such as HR or even managers, or you can even create a authorization to have new hires enter their records once they do new employee orientation or whatever. So there's benefits to it. So now we can save this, refresh it, and now it'll work. Okay, good. So now let's do the same exact thing to our division. So you'll see that it is truly the same thing as this. So we don't need to do this alert. What we need to do is create a constant, and let's call that constant maybe not category dropdown, but what we can call it is comp div dropdown. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to grab this and copy it, and then we can change what it is that we need to change. There's no use in retyping it if we don't need to. Okay, so this variable is going to be equal to the element by ID of category. Well, it's not category because we don't want to change that one. What we want to change coming over here is this comp division. So let's grab this and replace category with it. Now, one thing that we're going to have to be very careful of is when you copy things, instead of typing it or creating it new, you must go essentially line by line to ensure that everything is changed. So this categories, when we look at this categories here, this was called the data that we pushed through. So we're not wanting to use the categories, obviously. What we're trying to run a for each on is the data within this divisions. So we need to place divisions there. And then within every element of this divisions array, we want to run a for each. Now, this category is simply just a reference, so we can keep this category here because it doesn't really mean anything outside of this for each. And we do want to keep this constant option here because we're still creating the option. And then our option dot value is the category, which means that it must match this. We can use any name we want to on this. So it's going to create the value based on each category. And then it's going to create the text content based on each category. So the value and what the user sees is going to be the same. And it's not going to be the category dropdown because that's what we're appending the child to. It's going to be this. So now if we save this and come back over here to our form and refresh it, these here should still work, which they do. And now we should have divisions populated in our dropdown. So the next thing we can do is then, well, we're kind of at a crossroads. Ideally, we would want this job title drop-down box to only populate with the job titles that exist within the marketing division. Or what we could do is just simply populate our entire job title list, which is what we're going to start doing, and then we can trim it later. So let's go ahead and do that piece just to get all of our job titles in here. And essentially what we're going to do is what we just did, because we're not really filtering and it's not going to be dependent yet, but we just need to populate the data in there. So let's go back over to our analytics.js and let's create a function that we can clean up later. Get comp job dd. And our job dd is going to be the same exact, it's going to be the same exact thing as our job title right here. So let's grab this. Come back up here to our analytics. Now remember, our web data is a global variable within this project. It doesn't exist within any function, so any function within this project can call it. And then what we're going to want to do here is return that job title dropdown. So now let's come back over here to our total rewards.js, because what we need to do is essentially this to run a script to run essentially that function over on our Google Apps script side, our server side. And this isn't going to be comp div, this is going to be comp job, if I remember right. Yep. And we don't need comp div here, we can just simply do job. So now what we can do is simply grab this and then tailor it to what it is that we need this to be. So this is job. We can change this to jobs. And this is now going to be jobs. And it's not going to be comp division. It's going to be comp jobs. Comp jobs. And we can tailor that and delete that. Okay, good. So we can come back over here to our total rewards.js. And this is going to be comp jobs. And for each, we can still leave category in there. We want to create an element of an option. We want the value to be equal to whatever each element is, as well as the text content, because that's what we're doing for every category. It's essentially taking each element and giving it a name, really, And that blanket name is going to be category. And for each one of those categories, which is the element, it's going to do the value. And then it's also going to do the same exact thing as the text content. Now, this comp div drop down shouldn't be that. Let's make it a job drop down. And then you'll see just how easy it is once you get that main structure down, to where the only thing that won't work with it is because you left something or didn't change something over. So now let's come back over here and refresh this. Populate. As you can see, we have human resources and a list of all of our jobs. Now, if you're following along, and of course, the first one that I pick has a typo in it. Customer success representative. So to show just the benefit of this dynamic way we're doing this is, let's look at our job title and let's find that customer success representative right here. Let's add an S to it. And I'll make this a little bigger so we can see it. And you'll also notice that, okay, so we fixed that, but you'll also notice that this is kind of out of alphabetical order. Since this is dynamic, whatever we do here on the change, or whatever we do here on the sheet, whatever changes we make, will populate still within our HTML side. And since we're doing this with a drop-down box, the order will also be populated. So let's go in here to our data and we'll sort this. Now it's in alphabetical order. And now if we were to come back to our page here, notice how it's success without the S, and we refresh this, we can come in here and find that again. All the selectable items are now in alphabetical order, and it was corrected. So the great thing about doing things dynamically from a sheet and the way we're doing it is it minimizes, if not eliminates, depending on how you build it, the need to go in and actually change the code. In order to change these drop down box of values or whatnot, all you have to do is change the spreadsheet data and it will automatically update. So good. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here now that we have both of these populated. In the next video, what I would like to do is to condense these and make them dependent and essentially filter, because I'm pretty sure, the IT division may or may not have an HR business partner that typically belong in HR. So what we want to do is we want to filter all the job titles based on this drop-down box to only show those that are available. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to just leave it simply as it is and have the individual select. But that's what we'll work on next time, is actually this filtering piece, and then also condensing the code that we did prior, because we only need to really call this division and then chain the rest of our functions. So I hope this video was informative. And if you do like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. If you have an idea or a question, please send us an email. Our email is in the description. And until next time, please take care.